and Retention. I'm Diane Madrid of the Records Management and Retention Office, and I have Carl Baca with us, and Sharon Sur, and Ada Uribe, and Ray, just that's with our office and our technical staff, just left the room. So we're welcome, and we're glad that you all came to hear about the exciting information we're going to present today. So the reason we're calling this transition training is because hopefully we're going to transition you from the old laws and the old way of doing things into the new laws and the new requirements and what you will need to do. Also, some of the changes that we've made to some of our procedures related to very specific records. Okay? All right, so what we're going to cover, we're going to start with what's new. We'll give you all those exciting highlights specific to what the laws are and what they've changed them to. We'll talk a little bit about record series changes. We will also talk about the change to retentions. And retention, as everyone remembers, is how long we have to retain our records. There's a change to some of those. And then we will also talk about reference materials. So reference materials is a fairly new term that we're going to be covering, and in my opinion, the most exciting of the changes that the state did. All right. So first of all, one of the most important things, and you'll hear me say this just because all of them are really important, but the state took, we used to have 6,000 record series, and those record series rolled up to state codes or state laws. And the state transition goes from 6,000 to 350. They, put all of their analysts in a room, and they worked on this for 6 months and got it changed. They cleaned it up because the same record series used to exist in 3 different places, so it was very difficult to figure out which one we were supposed to use. And we helped you guys with that. We really put the most relevant information on our webpage. But it still got confusing, especially if you had something that was not a common record. And if you were going to find it yourself, that was a very difficult process. So this is going to make it much easier. Also, the records used to be called record series, the individual numbers that we would refer you to and what you had to put on your paperwork. They are now called record classifications. These new classifications all roll up under one state code that is called FSA-RMR, and you will hear us mention that often. It stands for Functional Records Retention and Disposition Schedule. All of this became effective October 1, 2015, which is why we have had our operations suspended for that amount of time, so that we could get training ready and our procedures changed and our forms changed and everything else. So these all went into effect as of that date. Now the new classification of records is based on function, which is why the new title, Functional Records Retention. So part of what's changed, some of those retention requirements have changed, some longer, some shorter. We'll go over that a little bit. Also, the specific distinction between central and departmental records has been eliminated. So I don't know if you recall, but in certain record series, like the personnel record series, used to have a .1 and a .2, depending on if it was the personnel version or if it was the departmental office. There were different retentions. So those types of references in the law has now been eliminated. You will no longer see those 2 different references. Also, the other new thing that we're going to talk about is a reference material record classification. And that new record classification number, 1.21.2.115. This is my new favorite number, just in case anybody needs to know that. All right, and it's very exciting. We'll talk about it in a little more detail. So just to give you a little bit of a visual, this is what the old New Mexico administrative codes, the numbers, we had 15.3, .5.7, and then 1.18.954 and 120.3. These were the actual laws, the New Mexico administrative codes, and then underneath them were all the record series, which all of you should be familiar with. They all got rolled up into what is now 1.21.2. Again, they went from 6,000 to 350, which is a huge, huge undertaking. So this is our new FRRDS, Functional Record Retention Disposition Schedules, 1.21.2. So with part of that, of course, we've had record series changes. Now, they are now grouped by functional classifications and called record classifications. We have, the state provided us with a tool for classification to assist us. They also provided us with a map. This is what the old one was. This is what the new one was. Of course, we had to look at all of those for NMSU and make sure that we mapped them appropriately or that the state had helped us with that. So this tool for records that are not on common schedules, hopefully you're all familiar with that, and we have provided those, is on our web page. And so if you have something that you need to look up, you can go in there and, you know, if it qualifies under any of these categories, you just keep going down. Employee services, that implies HR. You will eventually get to the very specific record type. Okay? But we recommend you first utilize our common schedules. That is always the first place that you go to. If you cannot find your record, then utilize this tool on the web. So if you look at we've provided the two most common, and these are the ones we've finished for now. We have departmental or unit files, and we have academic files. So these are the common schedules, and these are updated per the new record classifications. Do not use the old ones anymore. And so they have all been updated. But this is what we want you to refer to first. Only if your records don't fall under any of these do we then want you to go to this tool. Now, for NMDA, we have a specific list that the state gave us that we'll share. Did we already send that to them? We sent that to somebody at NMDA, but we can share that with you guys as well because your records are a little different. Also, for central offices, financial aid, HR, we have different classifications for you. HR has their own. I'm not sure if Benefits has a copy of it. Do they have? I'm not sure, but we'll make sure you get it. Also for financial aid, we're working on the central office schedule for all central offices. We're not done with it yet, but as soon as we do, we'll share that, which will have all of yours. Although for the most part, you guys know what yours are because you're actively using them. Okay. Okay, so record retention changes. As part of the FRRDS, the new schedule, there are some new record retention schedules. Some of them are significantly different. Some that used to be 6 years have dropped to 3. Some that used to be 5 have dropped to 3 as well. So there are quite a few changes. Now others have increased. In the area of some of the academic records, some of the academic records have increased. Now, there are some things that we think are illogical that we will be going back to the state and talking to them about and trying to get them changed, whether that be higher or lower. So, you know, we're also open if you guys have feedback. We would also take those to the state as well. Whether or not they will do it, we're not sure, but it doesn't hurt to try. They have given us an open window to do that for the first quarter. Now, the other retention change is that some retention schedules now state a time period from date file closed. This is a key change too. So date file closed can be a number of things depending on, you know, what the business is or what type of file it is. So date file closed really starts with a trigger event. And that trigger event could be close of fiscal year or calendar year, until superseded or obsolete, end of term, or date the audit report is released. So if you notice on your common schedules, one of your columns to the right says file closed. What that column indicates is what file closed means for that type of record. So for grants and contracts, the retention requirement says 6 years from date file closed. This is not what it used to say. But again, that date file closed gives us some amount of flexibility. The state has said You guys know your business best. You determine what date file closed means. That means we determine that as an institution, not at the departmental levels. So date file closed for grants and contracts, they equals the termination of the contract. So 6 years from the end of the contract, the termination of the contract. That is what date file closed means related to grants and contracts. So for every record that has date file closed in the retention, that is what we will use. We have listed that for you, so you don't have to guess what that is. If you find a record that does not have a clear file close date defined, contact our office. Okay? So central versus departmental records. So under the prior record classification, some records had a separate and distinct retention requirement for central offices and departments specifically identified. In the new record classifications, where there are both a central office and a departmental version of the record specifically listed in the FRRDS is presumed to be the central office record. This does not mean that your departmental version of that record is not a record. It is still a record. It just does not have to be retained for the full 3 years or 6 years or whatever that central office requirement is. Departmental versions of records that you may have sent to a central office for processing are now considered reference material. Reference material is maintained solely for ease of access and reference, but again, it is still considered a record. So reference material 1.21.2.115, again, this is my new favorite number. So the retention requirement for reference material is until no longer needed for reference. This is a key word. It doesn't say date file closed. It says until no longer needed for reference. So what does that mean? Well, how long does your office need to keep this copy for reference? I can't tell you what that is. It is going to be dependent on your office. Is it after it has been posted in Banner? Is it at the end of the term? Or, you guys will determine that. Only your departmental office can determine that. Some offices are much more comfortable holding on to finance transactions or things that have posted in Banner till the end of the fiscal year. That is your option. You determine that. But again, it's still a record, okay? Some offices, that 30-day or 15 days after the end of the month-end close, you guys are good with it then, and you're ready to get rid of it. It is no longer needed for reference in your office, but you determine that, okay? All right, so because of this new reference material record, we have created a new process to simplify the disposition process specifically for reference material. And this is paper only. So the RMR office, we've created a new procedure for this. And this procedure hopefully is going to alleviate some of that long-term storage burden that you currently have for the departmental units. Also the cost of shredding these documents. It will alleviate both of those following the new process. But it's going to be very specific. Specific reference material will be included in this process. Things like deposits, purchase orders, reimbursement vouchers, timesheets. There's a list of them. This is just a subset. But what we're going to do, we will be using a transfer of custody form in order to send those to our office. Not a request for disposition, but a transfer of custody. And it is very specific to the items I'm going to go through right now. So you have a copy of the transfer of custody form in your packet. We're going to review that. So a couple of key things This form is only for reference materials, 1.21.2.115. I'm going to say this a lot. Now, in your common schedules, there are a number of things that are identified as reference material. This process does not apply to all of those. It only applies to the list that is on this transfer of custody form. So keep that in mind. And the other thing I am going to do is I'm going to put an asterisk.
They're already there.
Oh, it's already there. So if you notice, there's an asterisk. Where is it? Oh, in the documents column, there's an asterisk by each of the files that qualify for this process. Okay? All right, so when you are sending us reference materials, keep in mind I need a transfer of custody for confidential and a separate one for non-confidential. The reason for that, I still, and by state law, I still have to process confidential and non-confidential a little bit differently when it comes to destruction. I still have to have them pulped and shredded by a third-party vendor. So keep that in mind. That's why I have to have a separate transfer of custody separating those out. Now, we also realize that initially you may have boxes and boxes because this new law is retroactive. Anything that you may have been holding onto in your office that had a 6-year retention or a 3-year retention or whatever it was is now eligible for disposition and destruction. If it falls under reference material and it is one of these types of records, you can follow the new process. So again, we understand that people will have boxes of this, quite a volume. So you notice on the form it says you can send us, so if you just, after we get through the boxes and you just have an envelope full, send them to us in our office. You're going to fill out the form, you're going to attach them, just put it on top of whatever you're sending us and send it in our office. But for the boxes, we're going to walk you through what we need for that, okay? So boxes, we know you're going to have volumes of that. So,
I have a quick question.
Yes.
I am not seeing direct pay requests on these lists. DPRs.
What's the retention?
I see reimbursement requests.
Yes.
But I am not seeing direct pay requests.
Why do we not have direct pays on these?
We can add it.
Well, looks like that was an error on our part.
You think probably it falls?
I think it falls under probably non-confidential, but we'll look at it because that's a good point. Because, keep in mind, you had 2 people doing this and looking at all of the things, but thank you because we do need that help, Kim. So yes, perfect. We will add those. So you don't want to use this piece of paper that you have. You want to go to our updated form that we will update. Yes. Yes.
For the confidential records, you have financial deposits, and then you've got non-confidential records deposits.
Okay, so the question is, and I am going to go over that, so if you guys will just give me a minute. So let me just skip that question and let me finish with the form. Okay.
Ada has something. Ada.
Oh, no, the direct pays is on the main track, but you are meeting on the transfer custody form?
If it's not on the transfer of custody, it doesn't qualify for this process. Okay, so total number of boxes. So this is the first field. I'm sorry, go up. Okay, so you need to fill out the requester information. Who is requesting, whoever's going to send us the information is fine. The department that's transferring the documents. Then we need to know total number of boxes. Now, if you are sending us just an envelope full in interoffice mail, just put in this little line, envelope, one envelope, we could go in there and put /envelope, but, you guys are smart enough to just fill that in. Okay, dates of records. Now, this is important. So if you look at the list of what we will accept, we have 2 categories. We have a confidential category and a non-confidential category. Now, some of these are listed in both areas. And the reason is, if you have been to our training previously, There are some instances and some departments that put way too much PII on some of these documents, which is why they are also listed in the confidential section. So that is why they're in both. And my advice to you would be, don't put PII on this type of information. Don't put people's credit card numbers and their home addresses and their home numbers and everything else. But that is happening, yes.
How big a trouble do we get into if we err on the side of caution and call them confidential?
No, you're fine to do that. It's better to do that than the other way around. The only thing is that I have to pay a lot more money to get those destroyed. So you can err on that side, but just keep that in mind. You guys aren't paying for that right now, we are. Okay, so again, we have the confidential list and the non-confidential list. You can combine anything in this group on one form. You just check those little boxes. I don't care how much of this you're going to send me. And the same with the non-confidential. Check all the boxes you want. Now, for dates of records, I only need to know the starting date, the earliest date of everything you're sending me, and the latest date. I don't need to know the individual date list for grade distribution file versus deposits versus timesheets. I don't need to know that. You just give me this date. Because keep in mind, I will be processing all of this as 1.21.2.115, which is reference material. The state is not going to ask me which one is a grade distribution file versus a timesheet. Okay? All right, let's go to the bottom. Does that all make sense? Okay, so the approval section, very important. I'm going to read that to you. It says, I certify the noted records are no longer required for reference in my organization. I understand once transferred to the RMR office, they will not be available for viewing or retrieval. Again, that's why your office is determining how long you will be keeping them for reference. Because once you send them to our office, they are not available. RMR will be processing those reference material records for disposition and destruction. You are transferring legal and physical custody to the RMR office. This must be signed by both the requester that's sending the records to us and the custodian person, whoever the custodian is. Typically, this should be the department head. It's not the administration person that is working through the records. Yes, they are the responsible person for making sure they follow the records retention, but the person responsible for those records is the department head or the director. Keep that in mind. Okay? So that is the form. So now let's talk about the process. The process is as simple as you are going to send your records either through interdepartmental mail or deliver them to the Fate warehouse with a transfer of custody form. Now, in order to deliver them to Fate warehouse, we will be having open times for the Fate warehouse. And again, if you have many boxes that you need facilities to do, you will still have to coordinate with them. But we will have open times. So from this hour to this hour, every month, at least twice a month, we will have open times. This is not for any of your other records or for any of your other records to bring them after they have passed condition assessments or anything else. This is only for reference material. Once they are in our warehouse, then we complete that disposition and destruction process with the state. You guys don't have to complete those forms. You don't have to wait until we give you permission to then shred them. You're done with that. The minute you transfer them to us, you're done. We will not be signing those forms for you and sending them back to you. This signed form through interoffice mail or taking them to our warehouse is all you need to fill out. You do not need a copy. If you notice, there is no section for us to sign this. Your signature on this is enough transferring them to me. So after this point, then compliance requirements are achieved. Okay, so a few things about this process. The boxing requirements that we have on our webpage for confidential records still need to be followed. Again, even though you're sending me reference material, if there's confidential in there, I still have to follow the state law and they have to be disposed of appropriately. So again, all metal must be removed for both confidential and non-confidential records. This is necessary for recycling. We will recycle all that paper and it can have a lot of metal. So you guys have all been to our regular training. You know what that metal includes. It does not include staples. It does not include little paper clips or, we're good there. It's just the big stuff. Don't put the big pieces of metal in there. All boxes, regardless of whether they're confidential or not, must weigh less than 50 pounds. This is both a state requirement and our NMSU safety requirement. Do not bring us something over 50 pounds. So if you come to our warehouse with these boxes for the reference material process and the boxing requirements are not followed, we may reject them at time of delivery. Now, we don't want you taking them back to your office, so you're welcome to just stay right there in our warehouse and clean them out. And then after you've cleaned out the metal, then we'll take them. Okay? You don't need to label your boxes. They're all going to be reference material. Okay. Special considerations. If any of your departmental records are associated with a grant, they must be retained as part of your grant file. Grants and contract files must be retained for 6 years from the date the file is closed. That's what date file closed equals for the contract, the grants and contracts, okay? So this is important now because some of those records, things like the backup for your reimbursement vouchers, your backup for your P card is not in BDMS SPA's research files. So the official files for grants are under BDMS in Banner, and that's where all of the research files are, maintained by Sponsored Project Accounting. But Sponsored Project Accounting does not have copies of that backup. Yes, that backup is in Banner, but everything else is in Banner. Banner is not a grant file. So if your reference materials are related to grants, do not process them as reference material. They have to be assigned to a grant as a grant file in your office, your departmental grant file.
And if you've got a P card that was used for grant purchases at any point in time, then all of a sudden the whole file.
Not the whole file, just those receipts, just the ones that were specific to the grant, not the entire file.
But if you pull those receipts off, don't you because it kind of goes as a set with all the charges for that 2-week period and the receipts.
Well, so two things. So for P card receipts, you're supposed to be destroying those after you verified them in the Caesar system. Now, what we have said is that you are allowed to, instead of destroying them, move them to your budget reconciliation file because that's your backup for your charges, right? Okay, so aside from that, if some of those receipts are related to a grant, you cannot destroy those based on a budget reconciliation file retention. You must make another copy of those receipts and put it in your grant file. I don't care if you use the original or a copy, but you have to store them separately as part of your grant file. You have to remember that those of you that manage grants, it has a different retention. You have to have that backup as part of your grant file 6 years after that contract is terminated. Does that make sense? Okay. Are you confused?
I'm glad I don't work with grants
Okay,
anymore.
all right, good. Okay, another special consideration. So personnel files on our common schedule, it does say that personnel files are considered reference material. They are 1.21.2.115 per the state. However, NMSU Legal has asked that we keep this at 3 years. She does not want us classifying our departmental personnel files as a reference material and getting rid of them at the department's discretion when that person leaves. So we will still maintain these for 3 years after the employee terms or leaves the department. That requirement is not changing, and we have it on your matrix according to how NMSU will process those. Okay? That's why I said you have to, in order to understand what reference material you are allowed to use, you need to use your transfer of custody form, and of course you can look at this and see where the asterisk is. Those are the only ones that qualify for that special process we have created. So in the case of faculty evaluations, there may be those in those departmental files. Those are not in the official evaluation, electronic evaluation. So HR and legal ask that we tell you, consider transferring these to HR to be added to the personnel file when the person leaves the department or after the 3 years, when your retention is up. Consider transferring those, because those evaluations only exist in your departmental personnel file. They do not exist centrally. There are not copies that go centrally. So consider this related to your faculty evaluations. Okay, so effective today, because you guys are all in training, our suspension of requests for disposition and research is lifted, effective today. So if people didn't come to training, we're not sending out a notice yet that says suspension is lifted. So you guys are allowed to start using RMR again for both of these. Okay, points to remember, very important. All new requests for disposition must have the new FRRDS classification numbers and titles. We will not accept anything that comes to our office that is not 121 dot. It must have the new FRRDS. Utilize our reference material option where possible. Again, 1.21.2.115. We will have those advertised Fate Warehouse times twice a month to allow you to bring that volume of reference materials to us. So the first time we'll be open for that is December 15th and 16th from 8:30 to 11:30. So if you guys want to get a jump on that and start to bring some stuff before the holiday, here's your days. And don't forget your transfer of custody form. Now, I also will mention, we were asked in another session if it was okay to send students. That's fine with us, as long as you send a completed transfer of custody form with them. You've already signed it, you've already turned it over. If you want to send a student to do that, that's fine. Just keep in mind the student will have to stay there until we make sure there's no metal in your boxes. Okay, the other thing for central offices, let me just say that our central offices have both central office records and departmental. So for things like your, you have reimbursement vouchers if your staff goes on travel, you have direct pays if you are paying for anything, you have a number of things that are considered departmental. Those are all eligible for this process. Your central office records that is unique to your office, such as benefits, HR, and financial aid, those are central office records and have to follow the normal process. Okay, and there are many records that are not reference material that still have to follow the disposition and destruction process. There is no change to that at this time. Yes, Samantha?
What would like our cashier backup, each cashier has their daily.
You are a central office, so those all have central office requirements. So I'll say one more time, for central offices, we are working on the common schedule. And I apologize that it's not ready. We started working on it a number of months ago and then found out that the state was going to change all the numbers, so we stopped. And also because our departmental people are always our priority, we had theirs done first. But we're working on it, and as soon as we're done, we will share those with you, so then you have your new numbers. Okay, good question. Okay. Go ahead. Okay, anything else? Any other questions? No? Good? Kim, happy? Okay, and I did listen to everybody's input in the back meeting and added some things which I'm sure you'll notice in there. Okay, great. Thank you guys for coming. Yes, go ahead.
Well, I don't know that I have to tell everybody this year's, but within that one file, what we used to call, what was it, budget reconciliation was labor distributions, there were reimbursements of direct pays and procurement cards.
Right.
Are you saying when I'm going to turn it over that I have to go in and sort out the reimbursements, the things that are confidential and non-confidential? Or can I just turn them?
You mean when, okay, so the question is, I have grant files, and when I'm doing my reconciliation, I have a number of reimbursement vouchers and all kinds of different things in my reconciliation. But this is all related to a grant file, right?
Correct.
Okay. So at the end of the contract, so the contract ends and it's been 6 years, you have all your grant file. Do I have to go through those and figure out which ones are confidential and which ones are not? The answer is no. If you know you have confidential in there, and a lot of the grant files are considered confidential because of the nature of the work, the nature of the research. You're going to have personnel things in there. They are all can all be very confidential related. You do not have to separate those. You deem those as confidential, and that is how you process them on a regular request for disposition and destruction form, not reference material.
But if they're in a, I guess, a folder that has metal prongs, take that.
That you do have to do. You have to follow the boxing requirements for everything. So let me just clarify what I said to Kim very specifically related to things. So Kim asked if I have things that I know are confidential and maybe I have some non-confidential in there. Is there anything wrong with erring on the side of caution and classifying all of those as confidential? And I said, no, there is nothing wrong with classifying those as confidential. I only ask that you consider that there is a cost for us when we're processing confidential. So if you know you have one confidential file in there and the rest are non, please just pull that one confidential out. Don't categorize them all as confidential. That's the only thing that I ask. But I do not want you having to pick through each and every file and every single piece of paper. If you have confidential in a file, remember, we want you to think of things as files, not individual documents. It's a confidential record, confidential file. Process it as that. We need to make this easy on ourselves. Yes, another question.
Me?
Yes.
Okay, so we do have a vendor that shreds our stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll save you money if we don't send the boxes. I mean, I can see you approving on a sheet, but can we still use the vendor, or should we just do away with the vendor?
Again, there are still records that are not classified as reference material. So there will be non-confidential that you still have to maintain the adequate number of years. Those you will still be responsible for the destruction. Not confidential, because there's a separate process. All of that goes central. But not all records are reference material. So the question is, should I hold on to those and not process them through the reference material? It's up to you. If you don't want to use the reference material process and you want to submit a request for disposition, you're still more than welcome to do that and go through your normal process. But I am giving you an option to expedite that process, to keep you from holding on to it in your office, all of those things. If you still want to use your vendor, that's up to you guys. I'm not going to tell you what to do it or not do it. I am giving you an option.
But if it's non-confidential records, it still goes through the same old process
Yes,
where
it does.
it will be approved and then you're responsible for destroying the
Yes.
non-confidential records
I said
after
that
they've
already.
been approved.
I said that earlier.
Right. Non-reference material, non-confidential.
That part has not changed.
So like when we're talking about personnel records from a confidentiality standpoint, like let's say labor redistribution, the only thing, I mean, there's salary information on there maybe and an ID. What do we consider confidential?
Well, first
We're
of
talking
all,
about that.
okay, so first of all, your labor redistributions, are you considering those part of your, I mean, do you keep a separate file for those? A lot of people just keep a separate file or they're in their financial files.
Yeah, let's say they're in the grant file.
Well, the grant file is part of the grant. So, but as far as confidential, on those forms, there's not really anything that is required that is confidential. That's why we don't have those listed in two places.
So, and the same thing with the reimbursement voucher, it's just their ID number. The only thing you're saying that could be confidential is if somebody put an actual copied a credit card on there.
Or their home address. People sometimes attach their personal credit card statements, you know, and so just be aware of that. Now, we did not put reimbursement vouchers in both just because in general people don't do that. But in training we do tell them. I don't want to put them in both because the typical classification is just non. So you guys have to use good sense in that. If you have a lot of PII, then it's confidential.
And what if we get it, let's say somebody does attach their credit card statement because accounts payable wants to show that it's been paid.
Redact the information that is not relevant.
And then we're okay.
Yes. The credit card and the personal address.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, Kim.
Okay, somebody from MMDA came to training and they were not clear about telephone bills file. So at MMDA, we have a person who prints off the phone bills, we pass them around, we pay any personal calls, and then that is filed. Is that what we're talking about here on telephone bills filed?
Yes. Yes.
So why is that confidential? Their office phone number.
Well, because if people have a large bill and they put their credit card number that they are going to pay for the bill, you know, and yes, there is a signature. So depending on how your office, some offices are not putting signatures on them, you know, I don't know. It just depends. They can be either one. But
that's the paper we're talking about.
Yes.
That's the document.
Yes, but do remember those signatures are considered confidential. You don't want to hand out everybody's signature.
Timesheets, is that paper timesheets when somebody forgets to hit submit
Yes.
or something like that?
Yes, paper timesheets, or a lot of departments still have old timesheets that they're holding on to. The old ones, they have files and files and boxes of those.
And what if you have like a supervisor who maybe prints out stuff sometimes? Prints out that timesheet to just look at it on paper and files it away? Does that all of a sudden become a timesheet as well?
Unless they've done anything.
Yeah.
They've annotated it, yes, it becomes a record. If it's just for information only, it's just kind of.
Right.
Read them, okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, shred it.
As long as you don't write on it.
Right. Okay, any other questions? Good changes, hopefully.
They're good questions.
Yes, very good.
Presentation.
Good, thank you. Good, we're excited. Get your stuff ready for next week.
We're gonna be at your door at 8 a.m.
We open at 8:30.
So Diane, I've got a storage full of grants that way are older than 6 years, possible.
Okay,
There's like, I don't know, let's say 50 boxes.
right. That doesn't follow this process, reference material, right? Grants are not reference material.
Right. So I'm gonna label them just confidential, take the, I guess I have to go in and take that clip off.
Okay, so if you have grant files, any other files that are not reference files, you must follow our standard process, which there's a number of things that you have to do. Doesn't have anything to do with this form
Or today's training.
or today's training. We are making no changes. We are making no changes to the files that did not get reclassified as reference material, other than your retentions may have changed and your numbers changed. You cannot send us paperwork with the old numbers. Refer to this schedule because it has those rules. But the previous processes that you were following, that you go to training, if you haven't gone to training and you need refresher, go to training again. We'll have it in January. We have it every month. But that training discusses exactly what you're supposed to do for all records. We will also be adding a section on reference material in that training. So if you know of people that didn't make it to our training that we had now, they can either listen to it, we recorded it, so there's a recording online, or you come to the regular information session training that we have once a month, and we will have the highlights of this training in there as well. There are not changes to our regular disposition and destruction process. What we have trained is the changes in the laws, again, the numbers and the retention requirements, and a new record classification called reference materials that allows you to expedite that process of getting them out of your office. That's it. Yes.
Did the friends and contracts, did it used to be 8 and now it's 6, or did it not stay there?
No, so technically it stayed, it went from 6 to 3, but the state realized there is another statute that overwrites that. So there is a small window. If you have a grant that per federal law or per the sponsoring organization only requires you to maintain it for 3, there is a short window that we will consider processing those through the modified law. But the state is going to be changing that back to 6 as soon as they can get it through vote. But they realized they were contradicting a state code. So it went down to 3, Kim, if you really want to go look it up. But we're not training that. We have some special circumstances where a specific grant is, it's completely ending, and they've met their 3-year retention, so we're going to work with them to process it through the new law. Okay. Yes, Ada.
No leaving boxes at the door. Where the transfer has to go.
Yeah, we'll be having a different conversation about records abandonment if that happens. And that is not a nice conversation. We have found records that have been abandoned, and that's not a good conversation. So, all right, anything else? Okay, great. Thank you guys.